Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out the door and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a deceptively cool day here in suburban Chicago. Now, I don't know whether, does deceptively cool mean it's cooler than it appears to be? Because that's what I mean to say. The last couple days have been very warm. When you look outside, it looks like it should be very warm. Then when you get outside, it's deceptively cool. Not cold, just, light hoodie weather because it's April. Anyway, well, welcome to Pick Up and Deliver. Glad to have you here. Well, I'm on my way to pick up my car. My daughter was running late today, so she needed to drive herself to school. And we don't have a parking permit for her to park at school, so she parks on one of the streets nearby. But those streets have parking that's limited for a couple hours. So if you park there all day, you can get a ticket. So we've done this a couple times now where I have some time in my day to take a little walk and she's running behind. So she takes the car, parks it at school, texts me a picture of where it is on Google Maps, and then I walk and pick it up and drive it home. Gets me a little exercise in the middle of the day, gives me a chance to record my podcast with my favorite friends, and works out just fine for everybody. So there we are. Well, I've fallen away from, or I've moved a little bit away from doing a review episode every other episode because I have caught up, so that's good. But it has been a couple episodes, and since I talked about some new games I played, so that means it's time for a Board Game Espresso Triple Shot. Ready for some tasty board game lattes? And actually, this is a highly caffeinated edition because it's a quadruple shot. That's right, I'm not doing 3 Board Game Espresso reviews, I'm doing 4. In parts because 3 of the games that I'm going to be talking about today are all pretty light party games, and so they're reviewable a little faster. It's not quite the 5 party game survey that I did a while back, but it's in the same ballpark. I also have one Dusty game that I thought I would talk about because it's been a little while since I've discussed that one, and I thought I'd bring it up to you again. So, to start with, the first game, which is neither Dusty nor one of the 3 party games, is the big beefy boy of the current, and that's Wyrmspan. Wyrmspan is a sort of sequel or remix of the game Wingspan, but it is different in a couple key ways. One, thematically, it's about giant dragons instead of birds. It's called WYRM, Wyrmspan. And then it is sort of the more gamerly version of the Wingspan model. So instead of building a habitat for birds, you are building a habitat for dragons. More importantly, the habitat for dragons that you're building is more complicated and perhaps more strategic. So if you haven't gotten a chance, this mini review assumes that you have played Wingspan. If you've never played Wingspan, it's hard to tell you what the differences are with Wyrmspan, but I'll give it a go. So in Wyrmspan, you are digging out caves and building habitats for dragons. There are hatchling dragons and there are adult dragons. There are dragons of different types that do different things. If you've played Wingspan, you're going to recognize a lot of stuff about this game. You have a board with 3 horizontal tracks where you're placing different flying beasts that you have acquired for your menagerie. You have a couple different resources to manage, and there's little eggs. There's also a huge deck of colorful individual cards with art on each one and different design sensibility for each one. The gameplay is roughly similar in that you take turns and you have a limited number of turns per round, and on those turns you're doing something in one of the 3 different rows. Those 3 different rows let you do different things. You can also acquire new dragons. So that's kind of where the similarities end. Wyrmspan has a number of additional wrinkles. Before you can put a dragon in a cave, for instance, you have to dig out that cave. And when you use a cave, you do it by going for a walk in the cave, and often the things that you can do are a bit more complicated in that regard. The game has a variable number of action markers. In Wingspan, you always start with, I think, 8, and then you lose 1 each round as you score the scoring round, so that in the last round you'll have 5 actions, which makes sense because the game is getting longer because you're building these big chains of actions that you do when you take your action. By contrast, in Wyrmspan, you have a set number of actions you can do, which are represented by coins, and then you actually can do things to get more coins. So when we played, we had some people who were taking a whole bunch of extra actions each round because they had more coins. However, you can also end up spending multiple coins on one action if you keep taking the same action. So the game has a compounding expense feature where you can take the same action more than once, but you have to pay extra action coins to do so. So that difference is interesting. There's also these guilds that can score you points, and there's a bunch of different stuff that scores points in different ways. But the long and short of it is, I think the best summary is just, it's like Wingspan, but charged up a couple notches to appeal to gamers who like a bit more elaborate work. The game's designed by Connie Vogelman, who I think also came out with Apiary this year from Stonemaier Games. And Elizabeth Hargrave consulted on it, I believe. I don't think she has a co-design credit. So I only played Wyrmspan the one time, and I played it with a couple of people who had played a bunch of times before, and one person who had not played it all before. In that context, I thought it was fun. I can see why people like it. I probably wouldn't turn down a game of it again. But ultimately for me, it wasn't different enough from Wingspan to make me want to have both. And I already really like Wingspan. I like the theme better. Honestly, I like the simpler play. The extra wrinkles did add a bit more planning to do, but I have plenty of games where you do complicated planning. So the question is this a better one than those? Because it isn't a better game than Wingspan for me in terms of the kind of things Wingspan is doing. So ultimately, the answer was no. Like I think there's interesting stuff in Wyrmspan. If I didn't have Wingspan at all and I weren't interested in birds, Wyrmspan would probably be the better game for me, and I certainly will enjoy playing it when other people get it. But barring some other thing, like my wife saying, you know what, I really liked that dragon game, let's go try that again, or can you pick that one up? I don't see myself getting Wyrmspan as part of my collection. But I still thought it was pretty enjoyable, and I encourage you to try it if you get a chance, especially if you are like a lot of people, you liked Wingspan, but you thought it was a little too random, or you thought it was not gamerly enough. Because this game solves both of those problems for sure. That's Wyrmspan. All right, next up I have 3 light party games that I played recently. Now, all 3 of them I played once. One of them I only played for about 10 minutes, and then we went on to something else, so I got just the lightest taste of it, but you'll hear from my discussion, it is what it is. So let's talk about that first. That's Charty Party. This is a game I picked up mostly on the strength of its name and the fact that it was $2 at Goodwill. So even if it turns out to be terrible, I can use the cards as backing for sleeving or something. But the way Charty Party works is you have a bunch of decks of tarot-sized cards, a whole bunch of tarot-sized cards, which are charts. When you look at them, they have a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. The horizontal axis is labeled with some unit, and you have a line going up and down and measurements. And then the vertical axis is not labeled, or vice versa. The vertical axis might be labeled, the horizontal might not. And the players all have a hand of cards that provide the label for the other axis. And the idea is that the judge presents the chart to the group, and everybody chooses and turns in one of their answers for what is this a chart of, and everybody looks at the results, and then the judge picks the one they think is funniest. So it's a apples to apples style judge game, which is generally not my favorite. It's a little bit cute because the charts are different, but ultimately this is pretty forgettable in terms of this kind of party game. Not a whole lot to it. And we played it for 10 minutes, and I don't know that I ever need to play it again. I kept it around, but it's fine. That's Charty Party. The second game is another one I played at my board game club. This one was, a student brought it, and it's called Herd Mentality. Herd Mentality comes from the same design space as games like Say Anything, or Blank Slate, or Green Team Wins, in which these are games where there is a relatively generic prompt, and as players, you're trying to find similarities or avoid similarities or differences with other players. I mean, all this goes back actually to the game Scattergories, which does the same thing in a sort of different rhythm, but a similar mode. In Herd Mentality, your goal is to say the same thing as the most people who said it. So like if the question is superhero you'd least likely want to be on the wrong side of, then people write down whatever they're going to write down, and I'll reveal, and if more people say one answer than any other answer, they all get a point. If there's multiple groups that say the thing but they're all tied, nobody gets a point. If you went out by yourself and you're the only person who said an answer, and you're the only person who's the only person who said an answer, then you get a point. But you don't get a point if two people said solo answers. You know, it is a very similar mechanism to green team wins, where the team that answers the most of a series of choices is the green team, and everybody who's on the green team gets a point. Again, these are fine party games. I don't find them particularly compelling. It's an amusing way to spend a half an hour, but I don't generally think that it's not generally a thing I would advocate to spend a lot of time playing. But, you know, that's fine. That's herd mentality. And then finally we played a trivia game called SMARTish. And the way SMARTish works is that you draw a series of tiles that give you categories, and then you put those tiles into categories and rate them 1 to 5. You get points based on what category you put the question in. And you also answer a question of difficulty based on the category, I think. So like the higher point value, the harder the question. No, that's not how it works. It's just you get more points. So you put the question you think you're more likely to get in a higher value. If you get it wrong, your opponents can steal and then they get the points that you assigned it instead. Yeah, it's okay. It's a trivia game. And I'm sort of spoiled now because I played Wits and Wagers. And Wits and Wagers is an amazing trivia game because you don't actually have to know the answers to the trivia. And it's just more fun. I mean, I really like a trivia game where I'm doing my best to get the right answer and say the answer first. But compared to Wits and Wagers, where there's a whole element of trying to bet, I just find that much more amusing. So SMARTish is a fine trivia game, better than Trivial Pursuit or something, but not good. I don't think I liked it as much as Bezzerwizzer either. Although, to be frank, I don't really remember Bezzerwizzer except that I thought it was pretty good. So that's SMARTish. And then finally, I did dust off one game last month that I want to talk about, and this is Century. Now, Century was a game that came out quite a while ago. I want to say 2016, and it made a huge splash at Gen Con. Everybody wanted this game. Everybody was fighting over it. There were playmats and everything. But the game also had a little bit of notoriety because there was a rumor that they were going to release an edition of it with fantasy art instead of boring trading in the Sahara art. And sure enough, they did. They released this thing called Century Golem Edition. And they said that even though the other games are going to be released in Trilogy, they were not going to do that for Century. But I only want to play Century if it's golems. So I got Century Golem Edition. It has the crystals. It was great. And then I emailed the company and I said, hey, I would buy these other sequels to Spice Road if you released them in the Golem Edition. But I'm not going to go buy the dumb Spice Trading Edition. And they did, and I followed through on that. I actually have all 3 of the Century games in the Golem Edition. I do like the other 2. Neither of them is as good as Century Golem Edition. The original Century is just so good. It is a engine building game that has a series of cards that are conversion engines. They convert crystals from one color to another. And then there's a series of golems that you can recruit that you pay the crystals to get. And the idea is that each golem gets you a certain number of points. And so by playing the crystals, you can get the golems that are in the list and get the points that are for them. As the game goes along, a river of golems comes up. The first person to take 5 of them ends the game. And then you add up your points. It's a pretty simple resource conversion game. It is very similar in feel and look to something like Splendor. In fact, when this game came out, people often talked about it as a Splendor killer. I mean, I think that's probably not true because Splendor is still there and selling more than Century does. In fact, Splendor's new dual version might be the Splendor killer that everyone keeps talking about. But nonetheless, it's a really interesting game and I think really fulfilling. Like, I like it better than Splendor, even though both of them there's a certain amount of input randomness and a certain amount of luck in terms of what comes out when you're the person who gets to buy stuff next. But there is a rhythm to Century that I find immensely satisfying, and the race that you can get into. And I really love the rhythm where one person could be going flat out just trying to get 5 cards as quickly as they can, and they could win against somebody who is going a little bit slower, but trying to really get an engine going where they're going to be able to rack up those big cards. The last game we played, I ended up with, I think, 3 cards claimed, and the person who won had claimed their 5th card. I was 1 round away from claiming my 4th card, and had I gotten my 4th card, I would have won. They won because they closed the game 1 round before I could claim it, which is great. It was a very tight game, because even though they had 5 and I had 3, I had taken 3 high point ones, and they took 5, the first 5 they could get, really cheap ones. And like I said, they edged me out by 1 round. It was really intense. So I love the way that it works. It's relatively simple to explain, fun to play, takes like 20 minutes to half an hour. I think the other 2 Century games are good, but not as good as Century Spice Road. Or Century Golem Edition. See, it's weird because in the original one, Century Spice Road is the name of the game. So there is no analog for the Spice Road part. It's called Century Golem Edition. But then the next one is like Century : something something Golem Edition. So there's no something something equivalent to Spice Road. So I keep stumbling over that. But it's great. If you haven't played it, definitely worth trying. It's probably fun in the Spice mode too, but who cares about that theme? Not me. So that's a game dusted off, and I'm happy to have played it. That's by Emerson Matsuuchi, originally published by Plan B Games. I think still so, but I'm not sure who is the publisher there. Well, thank you for joining me on my walk today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know what you've been playing. Head over to Board Game Geek and post a message in our guild, which is number 3269, or just Google Pick Up and Deliver Guild Board Game Geek. That'll get you there. You could also send a message to me. Wombat929 is my username there. Brendan at Rattlebox Games is my email that you can use to contact me. I don't know, or look me up on Board Game Arena. Wombat929 is my username there. I'd love to play a game with you. Invite me, I'll play. So thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.